Welcome to Viewpoints. I'm Heather Isvaron, and with me today is Peter Simpson. For 30 years in the UK, he has been in public service with the London Fire Brigade, the Metropolitan Police Service, and most recently is the founding father of the National Interagency Liaison Officer Program. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Heather. It's lovely to be here.
So you've been in this business for a long time, and you started with a small program that actually grew into a national program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It started in 1999 and 2000, and it was really in support of the Metropolitan Police Anti-Terrorist Branch, who were looking at a program around chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear response following the attack on the Tokyo Underground in 1995. And they were looking towards the kind of knowledge and skills of the Fire and Rescue Service in hazmat response to support some of the training that they were doing and to develop some of the response capabilities. So that was the genesis of it, and it became a very strong program in London. And we subsequently trained 12 officers looking at the whole range of skills in law enforcement and health and military that would work together to neutralise the threat or pre-plan and prepare in the event of an attack using CBRN.
And you were able to bring the London Fire Brigade into a whole new way of doing business throughout this program. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. One of the major things about the role of the Fire and Rescue Service, particularly when working with law enforcement, is law enforcement tend to see themselves in isolation. And a lot of that was to do with intelligence. They didn't want to share that intelligence. So it was looking at mechanisms in the way that we could share information and intelligence together and then allow us to work on interventions or interdictions against terrorist cells or plots. And the way to do that was to have some common ground. And intelligence sharing is a difficult thing, and it means different things to different people. Mm-hmm. So in fire and rescue, we consider intelligence to be information for action. We don't need to know a perpetrator's name and address or a specific location until the response is required. And so we agreed that we would vet a number of individuals to the second highest level in the UK to be able to share information and intelligence. And in a lot of cases, that was way above their law enforcement colleagues. And that gave us the access, that gave us the key to the door to be able to share intelligence and information between agencies.
And how did that work? Do you have an example of where that, where in the past that would have been an issue and now it's pretty seamless?
Yes, I suppose a good example would have been in 2006. There was a terrorist cell were believed to be holding a chemical device. And in the past, they wouldn't necessarily have shared that information with us. They would have waited till they were about to make the interdiction, and then perhaps they would have called us. Another example would be with firearms. The firearms teams, if it was a hostage or a siege situation, very often the firearms teams would wait right to the moment they were about to enter the building. They might use distraction devices within the building or outside the building, and often it would catch light. And it's at that moment that they would get on the phone and call the fire brigade. And we wanted to move that response curve back. We wanted to be part of the pre-planning. We wanted to be part of the operation to reduce that risk and become a kind of like a community risk reduction program than being seen in isolation. So that all the actors in a situation like that should share the information and the intelligence beforehand to make the best and the strongest response.
You were discussing how they work in different zones where now they work in warm zones, whereas before that might not have happened. Can you describe that a little more in detail?
Yes, I suppose internationally now, both in terms of hazmat and CBRN response, we use those descriptors of the hot, warm and cold zones. And that's been very useful for translating those areas of risk to all of our emergency services partners that may have been familiar to, say, fire and rescue in their hazmat response. That's been translated into the kind of marauding terrorist firearms attack type scenario. That's the Mumbai style attack, or active shooter as you might call it over here, using the same hot, warm and cold zones. Now fire and rescue and health will work in the warm zone, whereas in years gone by, if somebody had said, please Mr. Firefighter, can you put this ballistic protection on, we would have said, sorry, we're in the wrong place. You know, you're the ones that get paid to get shot at. We'll move then. But our risk appetite has changed, along with the international response to incidents like that. You know, and as a new MO comes out, a new terrorist MO, then we will focus on that and we'll prepare a response. So our attitude and our risk appetite must change along with the threat. And it's a fast-moving and dynamic environment globally now.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you're more international in terms of focus, and you were talking about fire, that age-old thing, being used as a distraction device or an attention-getting device for the terrorists. Can you talk, can you give an example of that?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of academic and practitioner research going on at the moment about fire as the use of or fire as a terrorist weapon. And we look at Mumbai, and if you study the tapes of that, particularly some of the stuff about where they matched up the telephone conversations with the images, that you could see that they were setting light to the hotel, for example, to draw attention to it. And that's been replicated on a number of occasions. So we're beginning to see a pattern in the way that AQ or other terrorist groups might use fire as a weapon. Mumbai was a good example, and then it's been used in Afghanistan on a number of occasions when they attacked the Intercontinental Hotel there. A group of terrorists with firearms and IEDs, and then setting light to the premises. It's an iconic image. It draws people attention. So, an outside shot of a hotel with the occasional bang going on, is of little interest to the news media. The reporting about what's going on comes later. But you have that iconic image of a raging fire with people hanging out the windows and screaming, along with a terrorist attack, then you've got that high impact image.
And how do you see this program evolving with the work that you're doing? You have it pretty much so the public safety agencies are involved, but how about critical infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a new and kind of exciting opportunity, I think, is that now in the UK with the National Interagency Liaison Officer Programme, we have an established and mature programme. We have over 500 officers from police, fire, ambulance and the military who are all trained to the same national standard, the same occupational standards. They all go through the same induction course. They meet each other. They understand the full spectrum of UK counter-terrorism response. And of course, I've said they're vetted, so that enables them to exchange intelligence and information. The question is now that there are more scenarios. How do we add value to a program that's ostensibly starts as counter-terrorism or critical incident? The trickle down is that you use those relationships and those protocols and procedures for every day. Now we see with other incidents, whether it's flooding or whatever it might be, a natural disaster where critical national infrastructure might be affected. One of the exciting things we see now is that we want to focus the development of that role within the critical national infrastructure, so those two elements can bolt together, so they can do the pre-planning and the response, where we're protecting not just UK citizens or anybody who happens to be in the country who may be affected by it, but the national infrastructure as well. And that's a very strong bond that we need to develop. So that's the newest challenge for me.
Wow, sounds like a great opportunity, especially when you get all those vetted folks. I mean, we try to do that here at the center with an education that provides a common language, a common way of collaborating with amongst agencies, and just looking at things similarly, but thinking strategically and policy-wise on any incident, because they are all first responders after all,
Yes.
and they're all going to be there no matter what happens.
Well, it is a global community, as you say. And one of the things that I've enjoyed is working regularly with the students here when they're doing the comparative studies element and they want to look at UK response and compare that to the US response, particularly around information and intelligence exchange, which I know has been, an issue. But it's not just the UK, US, it's further afield. And I've been lucky enough to work in Indonesia and in Egypt, both before and after the revolution, helping them in similar ways. The key element being it's about sitting around the table and talking to each other. And all over the world, there are agencies that the very first time that they sit down at the same table is when we go there and do it. So it's for them it's a unique program. For us, it's every day. And what we need to do is, take that, develop that, and recognise that it's a really strong model. We need to work harder to learn more about each other and understand each other's culture. I don't just mean internationally. I mean understanding the culture of law enforcement from a fire and rescue point of view, or EMS, and how we deliver our services and how we can work together better. And on a global scale, you go to Egypt and you look at how they do it. I work in Indonesia, and I bring that back to the program to say, we don't go around the world telling people that there's a UK solution to a foreign problem. It's always about the local solution to a local problem. And we share the framework of interoperability, interagency working, and that closer working relationship. And that's the very bedrock of what we do. And that's the way we need to move it forward on an international scale.
It comes down to relationships and trust, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your partnership here at the center, and thank you for coming today.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks, Heather.